All right, welcome back. I am very excited for this session. I'm here with Carla Williams, Wes Wu, and Lexy Martin. Lexy Martin is going to try and join. She is in the foothills here of California, in Northern California, that is, and there has been a big storm to come through. Knock on wood, I'm lucky my internet and everything's working because it was pretty severe. So she's having some challenges. However, we have Carla and Wes here to carry the reins, and if Lexy can join, she certainly will. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to turn it over to you, Carla and Wes. You introduce yourselves and what you're going to be talking about, and then I'll join you in 20 minutes or 30 minutes or so, and we'll have a chat. Does that sound good?
Sounds
All
good.
Right. Enjoy.
All right, thank you.
All right, I'll go first, I guess. This is Wes Wu. I lead advisory services over at Visier. One of my great purposes in life, ever since I was quite young, actually, was around D&I, and so very excited to join the conversation here today about D&I. And how it relates to people analytics and beyond. I'll leave it at that. Carla?
All right. Thanks, Wes. Hello, everyone. My name is Carla Williams. I am a senior client executive at Visier. I've been with Visier for about 2 years, and prior to that, I was a vice president of global HR services at Chubb Group of Insurance Companies, where one of the things I did was build an analytics team. And am really passionate about being able to help other customers of ours work through their analytics and aligning to their strategies. D&I is something that has been incredibly important in an aspect of the work that I've done, and I am excited to be joining Wes, and hopefully we'll be seeing Lexy in the near term to talk a little bit more about how analytics can support diversity and inclusion initiatives.
Great. So while we bring up the slides here, I'll do a quick intro to Lexy, although everyone kind of knows Lexy. Lexy is currently heading Visier's research with our customers. She explores their journey to gaining value, and she's also doing a lot of work into digging around all of the data we have on our over 5,000 customers, exploring key trends in the workplace. So we'll just go ahead and get started. So on the next slide, the data definitely does not lie. Industry analysts, business publications have done studies, surveys, and reports on why having diverse organizations really matter. Organizations way back as early as 2004 have reported that improving female leadership numbers is a major catalyst to correlating with higher value. There was a big study in 2016 where McKinsey found that companies in the top quarter for gender or racial and ethnic diversity in leadership are way more likely to have financial returns above their national industry medians. A more recent report by McKinsey investigated the business case for diversity, and they also discovered that greater diversity on teams, the greater the diversity on teams, the higher the likelihood of outperformance. And that outperformance has strengthened over time. And not only is it higher for diversity in ethnicity than for gender. So, we talk a lot about gender diversity because oftentimes that's what we have numbers for. But as the body of research keeps growing, we're finding that that correlation of better performance and outperformance exists in other forms of diversity as well. So the top practices in D&I aren't just for large organizations either. We're finding that retaining and recruiting top talent is critical for successful small businesses as well. And there are studies that are reflecting that as well. As we move on to the next slide, as you consider the business case for D&I improvement, there are a few things that we wanted you to be thinking about. Number one, there's some research from Edelman Trust that reports that 60% of the US public will choose to buy or not buy based on an organization's reputation. And so I'm sure all of you have seen it in the news, whether it's the tech industry and what happened a few years ago around gender pay equity. There were a number of lawsuits in the gaming industry, not casinos, but technology gaming. In the Northeast, things happening around diversity in a lot of the financial markets. But as you go from industry to industry to industry, this is not something that is infrequent. And every point of an organization's reputation that gets dinged is literally potentially hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. So there are numerous cases, as you know, from high-profile companies paying hundreds of millions to settle discrimination lawsuits. So consider that improving diversity and inclusion through the use of people analytics can, at a minimum, reduce the risk of litigation. Lowering your risk of litigation can pay for the analytics and the practices to help you improve the quality and effectiveness of your D&I stance. There are other reasons as well. So back in December of last year, NASDAQ reported that they're actually starting to think about having a new NASDAQ rule that will mandate diversity on the board of directors over the next 2 to 4 years. And so that's going to be a pretty significant impact from a compliance perspective as well. All of this can be quantified by using an average cost of D&I litigation across the employee population and discounted by the degree of risk reduction achievable. Hey, Lexy, I'm going to ask you if you're out there yet. All right.
No Lexy.
No Lexy quite yet. We can see her photo out here, but no Lexy quite yet. So let's go ahead and move to...
Oh!
Okay, you'll keep the video off. That's fine. Hey, Lexy, we're on the HBR slide. Do you want to pick up from there?
Yeah, sure. I'm assuming that you've talked about, kind of the research, the case.
Yeah. Yes.
And yeah, so, there's evidence that there is a business case, but this is the most important article I think I've seen in recent times. And I want to point you to that second sentence. Why should anyone need an economic rationale for affirming the agency and dignity of any group of human beings? This stuff is just important. It's just, it's the most important thing that we can be doing. It honors our humanity. We need to invest in this because it gives our lives meaning. And if profits come at the price of our humanity, they're just costing too much. So sorry that's the only thing I got to say today, but over to you, Wes.
So let's stay on that prior HBR slide for a second. By the way, everybody, thank you for the hearts and the claps. And don't think I didn't notice that when Lexy started speaking, all of those hearts and claps started increasing. Anyways, all right. So Lexy, I do think it's especially interesting, especially as we talk to a people analytics future of work community, that we conclude the research section of this chat with the HBR article. And we often fall into the trap that people analytics is all about the ROI of data, that the future of work is all about digital transformation and intelligent automation and whatever else. And indeed, we fall into this trap of forgetting that what makes the data insights valuable, what makes digital and robotics and process efficiency helpful to humans is indeed the uniqueness of our humanity that separates us from our technology. So when we talk about all of this cool future of work stuff, oftentimes we're talking about machines and the disparity between machines and humans. And so whenever we talk about future of work, indeed, the future of work people skills that we discuss are actually very, very synonymous with diversity and inclusion skills. And I oftentimes think about a few quote unquote C's as future of work skills. So things like critical thinking and creativity, connecting people and collaboration. But as we think about those future of work skills, critical thinking and creativity are so tightly integrated with diversity. And we all know about diversity and the increase of diversity really increasing your organization's ability to stretch the bounds of critical thinking and creativity. If we think about connecting and collaboration, again, very, very tightly tied to inclusivity. The more inclusive you are, the better you're going to be at connecting, the better you're going to be at collaboration. So when I think about D&I and our large employee experience initiatives, digital automation, people analytics initiatives, certainly there's an ROI to diversity. And indeed, diversity will actually help increase diverse digital experiences, give automation more data to work with. Indeed, inclusion is going to drive more rapid reskilling towards the future of work. But also, as we pursue D&I as a basic part of humanity, knowing that the side effect is better people analytics and better future of work, it just becomes obvious that we should not be driving diversity for its ROI effects, but as part, as Lexy said, of our basic humanity. So again, just to tie into the PAFOW community, D&I advancement really is tightly connected to people analytics and future of work. So really quickly on the next slide, at Visier, we do think about the framework of D&I maturity. We've thought about D&I, what we call 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0. 1.0 is about counting, and I won't read the things on this slide, but you know, it's the basic D&I dashboard. It's about head counts and measuring. 2.0 is measuring the impact as well as measuring processes. And so as we think about things like, do you have pay parity? And what's the driver analysis? And do you know why people are leaving? D&I 3.0, we think about as inclusion and behaviors. So all of a sudden, how do we actually connect diversity with employee engagement? Or how do we actually understand how people are networked throughout the organization, and how does that contribute to diversity? So the point here that we're thinking about is, in this last box, how have we evolved our thinking? There is a maturity along this space around 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0. But even larger than that, back to Lexy's point around humanity, the larger your focus on humanity and the lower your focus on just pure, let's get an ROI out of diversity, the larger your focus on humanity, the more successful you are going to be as you go along the spectrum towards the right, towards the 3.0. That's the first thing. The second thing is, the further right you go along that spectrum, will reintroduce the ROI, the more successful those strategies around people analytics, future of work, digital employee experience are actually going to be. So on our next slide, just as we reposition how D&I is about humanity and affirming our common dignity, we've also started to reposition D&I as a cornerstone of people analytics and future of work, and what that maturity looks like, not as a maturity path, but as outcomes instead. So we've started to think, and Carla's going to go into this in much more detail, but we've started to think about 1.0 not as counting, but instead about our concept of open book. And in other words, transparency. Not only are your employees going to have more trust, but the community around you is going to have more trust in the organization. And so transparency in our counting becomes very, very important. If 2.0 was about measuring, then we've translated this into a concept that we call open mind. And open mind is all about helping all of our employees and all of our leaders understand the goals behind the process change, and then managing the change itself to have impactful results. If 3.0 is all about inclusiveness, inclusivity, then our concept becomes open heart, which is really getting down to the roots of culture and how your employees interact with each other, their customers, and their communities. And so if we add all of these things together, we still have an equation that benefits our individual organizations, but we also have an equation that helps understand how to better include each other in collaborative environments, how to reskill our teams for the future, how to connect better for more ideation and critical thinking, and overall, how to create meaningful change in the betterment of our companies, our communities, and of the world.
Great, thank you, Wes. That was a really great overview of where we've been, where we're going, and what we aspire to. I'm going to spend some time now sharing what we've seen with respect to our customers and what they are doing with diversity and inclusion, and how that fits into the open book, open mind, and open heart concepts. So let's start with the open book. Companies that are just starting on their D&I journey often ask, where should they even begin? The first step is to really understand the current state, understanding what that organizational baseline is. Data can reveal where the organization is today so that the realistic goals can be set and action plans created to be able to achieve them. Then that same assessment can be used to continue to measure progress against those goals over time. The ability to make this information available and visible is opening the book. It's about building awareness and being transparent about the progress. Some organizations actually take this to the next level and decide to share their goals and this information publicly and hold their executives accountable for making sure that they're achieving against those results. The idea here is that you're using the data like you would any kind of financial statement of organizational health. I'm sure that everyone on this line has a version of a diversity dashboard, but there are still a lot of companies that struggle with the consolidation of data, the ability to set realistic goals, developing action plans, and having an accountability process. In relative terms, however, this is the easy part compared to the next step, which is really changing the behaviors. And if you wouldn't mind, I have a really quick experiment to share. So take a quick look at these two pictures. Based on your initial glance, which of these two men would you consider to be the most competent? So just give everyone a second. Okay, so you've made your selection. If you've said it was the one on the left, you're actually in very good company. In a study done by NYU in 2005, they provided subjects with these two pictures and gave them a minute to make that same decision. Which of these two men is the most competent? Keep in mind that the subjects knew absolutely nothing about these two men except these pictures. The man on the left is Russ Feingold, and he served in the U.S. military, the U.S. Senate from Wisconsin between 1993 and 2011. What's interesting here is that 70% of the time when subjects were provided with two pictures, they picked the person most competent as ultimately won an election and was elected to office. So what comes into play here is just this natural set of mental categorizations based on criteria that we're predisposed to, based on our experiences and internal sentiments. Often we tend to identify with a person that we've seen in a certain role before, that we are familiar with in some way or another. Maybe the one that looks to have more confidence or a higher degree of intelligence. This test, keep in mind, this test was just done with two white, middle-aged men wearing suits. Think about how your response may have changed if we had introduced other variables. So consider for a moment we change things up a little bit and we're looking at people that might be of different genders. What if we introduced race? clothing, religious attire, piercings, body art. Would that have changed your perception of your decision? Unfortunately, these split-second choices that we make are often formed by things that we're not even aware that exist. And as humans, we're highly intuitive and we make decisions very quickly based on predispositions. This can be very helpful in fight or flight situations, but this can be very difficult when we're trying to make changes and are trying to do things to improve our hiring and our development, our including and promoting of individuals that may be working against us. So this brings us to the concept of open mind. Open mind is about having awareness about what those things are that might be getting in your way of achieving your goals. And it's really only through being aware that these things exist that we can be intentional about making changes that can lead to real progress. The first of these is confronting unconscious bias. As we saw in the NYU competency experiment, bias can result from any number of factors. They're unintentional, which is why they are unconscious. However, it's often through this innate bias that we if we're not aware of it, we can't take steps to improve it. One way that we see our customers leveraging analytics to help support this is by determining if and where organizational biases might occur. So we can look at this through the lens of HR processes to identify where there might be areas of focus that we want to that we might want to have precise and prescriptive interventions to change some of the results. So let's take a quick look. I know this is this is an eye chart, and I will walk you through it as we go through them. So please bear with me. So I'm sure that everyone would agree that bringing more diverse talent into the organization is really the first step towards improving representation. So there are a few things that can be done to help root out bias in the hiring process. But first, we'll need to understand if and where those bias might exist so that we can determine where we want to apply some of those interventions. In the chart on the left, we're looking at a hiring funnel. At the very top of the chart, we see the number of applicants that have applied for a given position, and at the very bottom, we see the successful hire. The other thing to note in this chart is that the blue represents the overall number of candidates that have applied or that are going through the hiring process, and the purple representing some of the minority candidates. So the first thing off the bat that we might notice is that there are fewer minorities that are part of the qualification process to start with. So why are fewer minorities applying for the jobs? So there are a couple things that we can be doing to help improve the reach and breadth of the diversity of our candidates in the first place. One of them is to assess the availability of talent within that given region. We could also be using data to determine if posting on different job boards yields a higher degree of diverse and qualified talent. There are tools that can be used to scan the job descriptions to identify and make sure that they are free of words and phrases that would discourage certain groups from applying. Or we can, there are other technologies that can anonymize the application so that we are not predisposed to decisions that, that might bias our assumptions about the candidate, i.e., if they're male or female. And based on this funnel, we can also see, or you can't see, but I can see, that as we go down the process, we also see a drop in the number of individuals that are selected. So This might also be something to investigate further to determine if there's bias in the interviewing process. Things to assess here could be the diversity of our interview panel, or the success of diverse candidates with different types of interviewers. Once the hire is made, then we want to see if the talent has we want to make sure that our talent has the resources and opportunities to really thrive. In the middle illustration, what we're seeing here is that the time it takes different groups to be promoted. The length of the bar illustrates the average number of months to promotion. So the shorter the bar, the more quickly someone is moving into, is being promoted. What we can see here is that at the very is that whites, which are indicated by the bar at the bottom of the chart, get promoted in a shorter period of time than the Latinx and African American counterparts, which are at the top of the chart in red. We may want to explore if there is if there's bias in the performance management process, and if so, how is that potentially impacting the talent, the talent reviews. We may also want to see investigate if there's sufficient representation of diverse talent on the succession pipelines, and see if these individuals are receiving opportunities to improve their readiness to take on roles in the future. And when positions are available, are we filling these roles with this internal talent? Finally, we can recruit diverse talent and we can develop and promote, but it's not going to do us a whole lot of good to improve the diverse representation of our workforce if ultimately we are not retaining them. So it's kind of like turning the faucet on in the tub and not stopping the drain. So what we're looking at in the chart all the way on the right is looking at pay rates by career level for overall versus some of the majority groups. While fairly equal at the top, these rates are slightly less equal as we get into some of the lower career levels. What analytics can do is help us discover where in the career journey diverse candidates might exit and why. It might be about career mobility, it might be about pay equity. It could also be due to socioeconomic issues such as child or elder care that our programs and policies are not sensitive to, and which can be causing some women and minorities to make tough decisions. With the right data, we're able to ask the right questions and be able to explore and talk about insights so that we can recommend appropriate actions and improve results. And finally, it's not enough to have a diverse workforce. We also need to have an open heart and create an environment where individuals feel free to share their thoughts and ideas, especially if they're outside of the norm. To state the obvious, our workforces are made up of humans. As members of this human existence, there are some basic things that we all need to feel included. Generally, people need to feel recognized, valued, and appreciated. So how do you help employees feel included? You make them feel good about themselves and about their work. In the book, Making Work Human, Eric Mosley and Derek Irvine, they have a company called Work Human. They share that, and these are some interesting stats. 58% of employees never receive a thank you from their bosses. 68% think that their company meets new ideas with skepticism and hostility. And 80% are never or are rarely consulted about their personal growth goals. So actively doing some of these simple things would go a long way towards improving a feeling of belonging. And from an analytics perspective, we can assess how well we're doing through evaluating things like the health of our corporate recognition programs. Is recognition being broadly distributed among employees regardless of ethnicity, gender, etc.? Social recognition can be a really great motivator as long as it doesn't promote exclusive behaviors. Performance management is another area. Ensuring that performance reviews are not only completed, but that there are regular check-ins and development plans that are defined for and in place for every employee. We can also assess employee sentiment through surveys, like engagement surveys. And additionally, one of the other things that we talk about is organizational network analysis, which can help us determine how well connected different groups are, and if this connectedness leads to higher engagement and promotion. So what we're seeing here is an organizational analysis performed by one of our partners, TrustSphere, for one of their customers. This study evaluated if there was a difference in the strength of the networking between men and women in their vertical or their up relationship within their organizational hierarchies. The peach-colored slice of the pie reflects the network relationship of an individual at a higher level within the organizational hierarchy. We can see the assessment of men is on the left and women is on the right. And what we can see is that men tend to have stronger upward network connections, whereas women have greater experience in being able to network across and down. So this provides an objective lens to determine where there might need to be improvement in that connectivity and engagement, and particularly if we want to ensure that women are remaining visible and are provided with the opportunities to engage, contribute, and be promoted into levels of greater influence. Lexy, if you're still around, are there some other ways that you've seen organizations work with an open heart?
Yes, of course. Can I get the next slide? You can hear me. Oh, good. So in terms of embracing the third part of our framework, open heart, and really embracing humanity, it seems that lasting change requires connection to your organization's purpose, and really credible change needs both authentic leadership and frank dialogue. And so the programs that we're undertaking at Visier and see others doing are a set of practices that really harness these conversations, this social dialogue at work and in the community, and then connect that to our organization's vision, values, and purpose. I think, this last year, employee and customer expectations for an organization's response to social causes has really been raised. And we just see so many employees really wanting to participate and shape that dialogue. And, some organizations are really far along on this. One of our customers, Train Technologies, has an extensive network of employee resource groups that focus on issue areas and have a strong commitment to listen and act and to engage in really constructive dialogue. And what they're trying to do in their ERGs is to create a culture where the default is to trust that merit and performance, like you talked about, Carla, will prevail, and that just doing the right thing really feels natural. So they have 8 employee resource groups: women, Black, veterans, LGBTQ, and others. They have both US-based and international women's network. They have inclusion networks in manufacturing and sales offices that sponsor events throughout the year and augment these ERGs. They don't want their people to feel like they can't share, even when it's hard. So they also sponsor Bridging Connections. These are sessions that provide an outlet for employees to have open conversations about the really difficult topics: race, gender, mental illness. So, by connecting people and ideas in social dialogue, they're leveraging the power of diversity and inclusion to bring people together. And we're doing this at Visier as well, and really paying close attention to always connecting our people and their conversation to our vision, values, and purpose. And, speaking for me, one of our values, and I have this on my board here, One of our values is to be proud. We set the bar high. We share pride in decisions we make and the difference we make in the world. And I'm really proud that, our product is being used so effectively by our customers to really begin to make a difference in improving diversity and embracing inclusion. So I think it's back to you, Wes.
Thanks. So we'll have just a couple of summary slides here. So we have a lot of great and insightful strategies for you to pursue within your journey. I think, we often get stuck again and fall into that trap that diversity is a business imperative rather than a cultural and societal imperative. If we pursue the transparency that is in open book, if we pursue the thoughtfulness that we think of as open mind, if we pursue the purposefulness of open heart, not only can we actually change our companies for the better, but we'll also change our broader communities. And if we do this right, D&I is a cornerstone of our future of work behaviors, new skills, which is then a cornerstone of digital and future of work transformation initiatives. I'm going to close here with the quote again from Lexy's slide and HBR. We're disturbed by the implication, though, that there must be economic grounds to justify investing in people from underrepresented groups. Why should anyone need an economic rationale for affirming the agency and dignity of any group of human beings? And again, that's from HBR. So, Lexy, do you want to go through the last, I don't know if we have a final slide or we should just turn it over to Elle?
Well, I'll jump in, and if there is a final slide, we can certainly pull it up. But number one, thank you. I've had the good fortune, unsurprisingly, of being on every session today. And I've also, as you know, facilitated a one-day event on this specific topic a couple weeks ago. So obviously, it's top of mind for me personally, and in our space in HR, future of work, people analytics, it is, if not the top issue, then it is, certainly the second most, and it's not going to go away. It's something that there's a lot of improvement that not only can happen, but that needs to happen. So I certainly celebrate that you all have put a framework around it that's readily understandable. I want to wrap my personal question in with a question that came through around empathy and measuring empathy and allowing space for empathy. And I'll frame it this way, is that most people have to practice empathy. It's not something that they're out of the box, they're good at, to slow down, to hold space, to truly listen, to practice affirmative inquiry, to not judge. That's all things that take work and practice. And then it invites the question, is the challenge of an organization just to hire people that have that already developed? I mean, that would be a nice, altruistic future state. But the reality is the organization likely needs to develop that skill and create space so that can actually flourish in an organization. So when you talk about that particular open mind or open heart place that we're in, Wes, I'll toss it over to you first. What do you think of just an organization's responsibility to nurture empathy and related skills?
Well, gee, thanks, Al. That was a hard one. I think I don't know if we have specific, concrete, and direct ways of measuring empathy today. But I do think that there are probably leading indicators around how we can get there. So there are going to be leading indicators around this. And again, it's not terribly direct, but leading indicators around, hey, if we're training our leaders around empathy, and we know which leaders are completing that training, and then if we then pull in our employee engagement scores, And then we actually pull in organization network data around how those leaders are interacting with people in a way that might be different than people who didn't go through empathy training. I think there are ways that we can navigate towards, I don't want to say, is there a way to measure empathy, but are our empathy initiatives actually taking hold within the workforce and starting to change some of our behaviors? So I think that would be the first thing that I would maybe be looking for. But again, it's hard to measure something when there isn't a ton of data for it. And so we have to figure out what are those pieces of data that can indicate for us whether we have some success or not.
Yeah, I love that response. I love your thinking on that. I think it's elegant and appropriate. Before I go over to you, Carla, Lexy, are you there? Can you provide your perspective on that? Because I know leading with your heart and truly listening to people is something, no pun intended, dear to your heart. So
I don't know that I have audio. Can you hear me?
Yes, you do.
Okay, so what was your question again?
And sorry, the idea that an open empathy and measuring empathy and knowing that it exists and being nurtured consciously in an organization, just any your ideas or perspectives on its importance and feasibility.
Yeah. Feasibility. I was thinking as you guys were talking, and I posted something in the chat, that I think we can recognize empathy in each other through the recognition we give each other. So at Visier we have this thing called high fives, and every once in a while I'll get something in the mail that where somebody said I did something good, high five, and it's a neat little card that I actually cherish. But it's through acts like that we can recognize what goes beyond just our work persona to the empathy that we have for what's going on in the world today. And I think through that kind of recognition we can really embellish empathy at work. Yeah. What do you guys think, Carla?
Yeah, Carla, go ahead.
Yeah, I totally agree that recognition programs are an amazing way to be able to allow us as humans to recognize others within the workforce, and to be able, just a little recognition goes an amazing way in helping people feel included and valued, which is incredibly important in the way that we work and want to be perceived, and to help us feel like we're part of a community. I think to the other part of it is, how do you know when it comes to measuring, how do you know that it's been accomplished? What are the outcomes that you're trying to see as a result of, maybe people showing up and being more empathetic, managers being a little bit more open to hearing some diverse ideas and thoughts, people really making an effort to hear different perspectives and to understand where those might be coming from. So I think that if we begin to frame, if it's something, it's not measuring the act of being empathetic. I think it's really, the goal at the end of the day is that we're recognizing and valuing each other as individuals and what those contributions are. So figuring out what are those outcomes, what are those outputs that we expect to be able to recognize by doing that. Those are the types of things that we should be able to get better at measuring.
I just want to call something out as a topic for not only us to discuss a little bit now, but for all the participants to consider, because it's a messy question, but it's something that stems from a concept that you shared earlier, Carla, is that if you have practice that inadvertently or maybe even consciously become exclusive. So let me give you an example. I'm a volleyball coach. I don't give MVP awards. Why? Because each member of the team is critical. If a group is only as strong as its weakest link, if a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, is not the weakest link the most valuable? So there's these somewhat existential questions, and people are recognized and somebody else puts in a similar amount of work, yet they don't have the same recognition or visibility, then it could be an inadvertently exclusive process. So anyway, I don't imagine we're going to wave a wand. I just wanted to call out and get your perspectives as we think about the processes that are generating the data that are telling us whether or not something's happening or not happening. How would you advocate those decisions be made, the governance around it? And let me point a fine point on it with the interest of time. There are those who have been reluctant to have exploratory conversations about what's possible because they've been rooted in what I would call legacy data or legacy mindsets. And what I find is that we need to uproot from where we've been so we can actually explore more appropriate ways to get at this very, very important topic of inclusion, senses of belonging, safety, both physically, emotionally, and psychologically. There's three things, so both doesn't apply. But anyway, you get the idea. So, Carla, since you brought that concept up earlier, what are your quick thoughts there?
Yeah, totally agree that, there's always that byproduct of having that negative outcome of doing the absolute opposite of what your intentions are. And, I brought up the example of the recognition. It's important that, through analytics, we can assess how well distributed recognition is being given, and if there are any groups that might be excluded or that aren't receiving, the same types of the same numbers of just recognition. So there are some things that we can be doing along that lens to just make sure that we're not being exclusive. I mean, if we want to get even more fancy about it, there's being able to look at language and performance reviews, for example. That's another way that using maybe AI to evaluate some of the text. Some organizations are looking at doing that type of assessment to see, is there a difference in the way that a manager might phrase language around performance for a male employee versus a female employee, for example. So yeah, I think, as professionals that are focused on the future of work, especially as we endeavor to become more engaged and more hopefully empathetic to the humans in our workplace, we'll need to continue to work through making sure that in the effort of doing something good, that we're not creating unfortunate outcomes.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And, Wes, you've been guiding HR transformation initiatives for a long time now. And so you have this kind of keen perspective on the obstacles to getting from where an organization aspires to be to, where they are currently. So my question as we, start to wrap up here, and if you want to take it in a different direction, given the nature of the conversation, by all means do so. But where I get frustrated on behalf of many people who are trying to have better DE&I initiatives is that they are, let's say I'm a DEI leader, I have limited resources. I'm an influencer. I don't have a big team. I don't have a huge budget. So I got to influence around the organization. So, what would be your coaching or suggestion? And, without sounding self-serving and teeing up, I've seen many kind of leave data, kind of just, it's a blind spot for them. The value data and analytics can provide them to get where they want to go. So, what are your thoughts there?
So since this is PAFOW, I'll make it fairly broad. But whether we're talking about HR digital transformation, whether we're talking about people analytics, whether we're talking about future of work, it all comes down to data. And I'm going to use an analogy here. Google Maps is not a digital experience in and of itself. Just because you have a map on your phone is not a digital experience. What made Google Maps a digital experience is the simple fact that Google pulled together 5 billion points of data. They've got the map, they've got Waze, they're tapped into GPS on all of these phones, so they know who's traveling at what speed and what the congestion is. And what makes it a digital experience is, number one, they've brought together all of this data, and then number two, you can interact with the data or they can interact with you. So the ping that comes up and says, we just found a quicker way for you to get home. Do you want to take it or not? That's what it's all about. And so whether we're talking about digital transformation, whether we're talking about future of work and the skill sets that are required, whether we're talking about people analytics, it's the aggregation and the confluence of all of that data, and it's putting that data to use. And I think the obstacle that so many people analytics organizations seem to have is they think they're a small part of the organization. If we can't get data right, if we can't get all of this data in one place as a digital HR transformation initiative, we're not going to get any of that other stuff either. So this is central, this is a core premise of and building block of all of those other initiatives that we have out there. So sorry, I don't know if that was too long, but
hey, it wasn't too long. It couldn't have been more spot on. I mean, we know each other well enough to know that I'm nothing but going to agree with that statement, because yeah, the alternative and struggling to try and put that together is agonizing. And the great thing here in 2021 is that Visier in this case, has done a lot of that work for organizations. And I don't mean to say that just to tee you all up. It's just a matter of fact. This wasn't the case 10, 15 plus years ago. So, kudos to you all. As we start to wrap, Carla, closing thoughts.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for including us in this conversation. Always a pleasure to have this dialogue, especially with my esteemed colleagues, Wes and Lexy. I am excited to continue to be on this path and continue to see and share what work everyone is doing to help ensure that we continue to move in the right direction.
All right. Well, thanks. Lexy, you want to bring us home?
Yeah, I was listening to Wes talk about the importance of data. There's another piece here, which is we've got to each individually be brave enough to speak from the data and to really use it as effectively as we can to point out the places where corrections need to be made, and to just beat on it if we have to. I just think we each have a personal responsibility also to use that data to make effective changes, to hire more diverse, to promote more diverse, to retain more diverse voices, and then also to create an environment of inclusivity. And so it's both data and personal responsibility that I think need to come to the fore.
Yeah, well, thank you again for saying that. Thank you for the research that you do. Thank you for the advisory that you do, Wes. Carla, thank you for serving the customers as you do. I mean, you all are again.
And also thank you.
Well, just the arc of this space as I look back, and these days are long for me, but they're immensely enjoyable, and I get perspective on where we've been and where we're going to a certain extent, and to see what you all have contributed, and just the kind of the maturity and attainability of the narrative is inspiring for me, and I hope it is for others. So again, thank you three for sharing and doing what you do, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Al. Always.
Right,
Thanks, Wes and Carla.
Bye.
Bye.